living his dream and he's still there? Or is there like legitimate reason, like from what you've seen from Ferrari on the track?
I think Lewis is massively refreshed at Ferrari. We've seen that right from the moment he stepped into the red shirt, the red overalls. But I think also what he got from the car was encouraging. Doesn't have the same issues that he had with the Mercedes over the past 3 years. And so already it appears he's able to make the most of his exceptional talent, his ability to be very late on the brakes. I've gone into diving into the telemetry from the cars, which you can now find online. It's fantastic. And, his ability to get on the brakes really late and then apply the throttle and then keep up with other drivers, whereas previously he might have to dip in and out the throttle. There'd be a slight mistake, a slight slide from the Mercedes. That doesn't seem to be happening with the Ferrari. Now, that's not to say that Lewis Hamilton's about to win a world championship. He's back to his very best because he's admitted himself there's still a huge learning curve with this Ferrari, and Ferrari themselves, I think, are facing a little bit more of a learning curve than some of their rivals because they've basically turned the front suspension upside down and they're learning a lot about that already at this part of the season. So I think it might take a little while longer for them to get there. And the message I got from Fred Vasseur was actually in Italy yesterday. We were at an event with one of the sponsors. And the message that Vasseur was putting across was, look, don't believe everything that you see in testing. Don't even believe everything you see in Australia. Give it the first 5 races. And team principals say this at the start of every season. But his logic was right. By the time you've had that variation of tracks, especially somewhere like Suzuka, that's going to be a track that really exposes weaknesses in other cars. So even if Lewis isn't quite firing on all cylinders in Australia, even in China, if there's still little slip-ups or a few temps missing, don't rule him off because it's a very long season with 24 races.
I just like the fact, what was the quote? This is the most positive I've felt in a long time. And considering all of the issues that he had at Mercedes and the fact that that was like his home and his comfort zone, to have him be in all of the newness of Ferrari and to know that there is a steep learning curve, not just like with learning new terms and new people, but it's like he's driven a Mercedes engine his entire career until now. So like that is another thing to take in consideration, like just the fact that he is feeling as positive as what the outside appearance would lead you to think he is. I just think it's exciting, and why not want to root for them?
Well, and you could see that, Nicole, in the press conference on the
Yeah.
third day when Lewis came in to talk. I mean, what was I got a lot of messages being like, all you guys are focusing on is Lewis, but it's not just the journalists. The photographers were lined up. I mean, there's about 50 of them outside the press conference room for Lewis. And then he actually went, I think he came through everyone was like, has he gone through the back way? Photographers are running around trying to work out where he'd gone. But he's so positive. I mean, he carries himself in a slightly different way this year. Last year, I think you could tell he was quite frustrated with things. Laurence is right. He's gone in there and he just seems completely invigorated about what he's doing. And you can actually really see that. I mean, every question he was asked, even some of the car questions that usually Lewis is like, I don't know, man. I don't know, I don't know what you want from me. He kind of answered it all with a smile. Now I don't know how long that will last for, but it really is telling. And I think that from speaking to people at Ferrari, they've also been invigorated by how invigorated he is. They've loved seeing him like that. So I think the whole energy there is really good, and also you can see it in Charles as well. Like I don't know who's up currently in their chess head to head, but you can
I don't have
tell
an
he's
update.
yeah, you can tell, but you can tell Charles is actually kind of enjoying this new attention that's on the team because it's a chance for him to thrive as well. So I'm really excited about Ferrari. I think it's such an exciting year for them, and I think Lawrence is completely right. Actually, if you look at last year,
Uh-huh.
Ferrari Ferrari really was still not in a great place midway through the year. It was over the summer break, and it was in those races
Monza.
before then. Yeah, and then suddenly they were the best team for the second half of the year. So as long as one team doesn't run away and dominate, I think for why can't Ferrari win a championship?
I guess like we're gonna get to like the official part of like the season preview in a second, because that's what we're officially calling this version of Unlapped. But I have to wonder, like for Charlotte at least, like there's so much attention right now on Lewis, and he's getting asked about Lewis over and over and over again. Like at what point does that just run a little bit thin and like start to get on his nerves?
I think already because the PR person that set up my interview with Charles, which wasn't actually someone from Ferrari, it was someone from Puma, said no questions on Lewis. So clearly it's got to a point already
Got it.
where I don't know whether this comes from Charles or I think it's as much coming from the team that, they realize all this attention on Lewis, Charles is in this great position himself. But I don't think he's hating it at all. I think he's actually really loving having Lewis in the team. And he'll have no problem if he flies under the radar, doesn't get quite as much attention going into, this first race, and then goes and beats Lewis. He'll have no problem with the fact that he gets fewer questions, or the questions are about Lewis. And if he can perform on track, of course, the questions will very soon just come around to him, and we'll get used to the fact that Lewis is wearing red this year. So Fred said something very similar, that, he thinks this is actually an opportunity for Charles to, to show what he can do, to prove to everyone that when he goes up against a 7-time world champion, he can either keep the pace or even be faster. And if that's what Charles is able to do, then this is a fantastic situation for him. So at the moment, I don't see it as an issue for him. I think he's, very aware of saying the right thing when he talks about Lewis. It's still very positive. And whether that can last throughout the season where they're both fighting for a title, I have my doubts, but that's true of any two teammates. It's not these two characters. And in fact, the fact that they have this bond already, and I saw both of their phones at various points during the night last night, because they had them out between media sessions, and they were playing online chess. I didn't get an update,
Really?
but it's still going on. So we'll try and get an update in time for Australia.
Well, as soon as they stop playing, we know there's disharmony behind the ranks. That's how we're going to know. On that point, Laurence, and Nicole as well, I mean, you'll have spoken to Charles as well. I can't think of a time I've actually seen Charles Leclerc legitimately angry or ticked off. We've heard him in the car, but if you actually think about it, I just think he's got that kind of Labrador energy, hasn't he, about him? I don't know if he does get angry about stuff like that. He's quite calm, collected.
There's
been a few times, I'm sure, when maybe,
but a Labrador.
But he's quite good at, like, his frustration. He's very good at kind of saying something, and then he'll say, I need to talk to the team.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he puts on a very good face the next week. So I think it suits to exactly to Lawrence's point. It suits him to the ground, this situation. And I think that he actually might be quite a good counterweight to Lewis, just character wise. I think that's probably why they're getting on quite well.
And where he is underrated as well, just while we're on the subject of Charles, because I think it is important to talk to him about him as much as Lewis, because he's definitely a title contender. Is his mental strength is one of the greatest on the grid. And I think often we can forget that, because he is this super nice guy. He's just a bit, Labrador, kind of cuddly, friendly, but his mental strength is so deep. And I think a lot of that comes from his background. Of course, he lost his father during that F2 race in Azerbaijan. He was racing, and his dad was back home and was very unwell and passed away. And he went and won that F2 race. And, there's so many stages in his career. Jules Bianchi was his godfather as well, someone who mentored him through his early stages, and yet he lost that guiding person in his career, and yet was somehow found strength from it, and continues to draw on that strength.